Forward to talking with him for some time. For I first learned about this substance called Ormus from my friend David Wolf, raw food enthusiast, and have just heard bits and pieces over the years, but really have not taken the time to delve in, thinking that someday I'm going to talk to a gentleman who probably, I don't know if he agrees with this, but it is said he's one of the foremost authorities on this magical substance called Ormus, and his name is Barry Carter. Barry finds himself in Baker City, Oregon. Well, that just sounds lovely, wherever that is, Barry Carter.
Well, it's in eastern Oregon.
Yeah.
Hi, Patrick.
Hi there, sir. Nice to have you here. How are you?
It's nice to be had here.
Yeah, well, I know. These days, it's just nice to be anywhere, isn't it, Barry?
There you go, yes.
It's just nice to be anywhere. Well, your story is just pretty interesting. I mean, you were a carpenter and woodworking, an inventor of sorts, and you ran into a fellow who had poisoned himself with arsenic and, was it iron?
Arsenic and lead.
Arsenic and lead many years ago. And he was working with gold mine waste. Is that right?
That's true, yeah. He was, this was back in 1988, 89, in that realm, and he was working using ozone to clean up mine waste, and he was having some problems with this mine waste material that after it had been ozoned, it did unusual things. It had, if he dried it out in the dark, it would float away from his hands. He couldn't catch it. He called it fly ash. If he dried it out in the sunlight, it would disappear in a flash of light. And before it was dried out, as long as it was in a liquid, it would shock anybody that was anywhere close to it. He had a problem actually grounding the treatment device. He had to keep replacing the wire because the wire kept burning out. It was too small. Finally, he ended up with a wire the size of a finger to ground the thing. And he accidentally had a leak in the pipe going to the treatment device, and went to tighten it up. It was a coupler, and went to tighten it up, and he got shocked.
Huh. Boy, did he have any idea of what he was dealing with here?
He not really. He didn't. It was just totally baffling. I mean, he'd put his hands near it, and yellow fibers would grow out from underneath his fingernails. You know, this was just really strange stuff.
And the original material it came from, Barry, was gold mine waste.
It was mine waste from a mine in eastern Oregon, yes.
So there was some gold in there, some remnants of gold?
Oh, yeah. There's a considerable amount of gold. In fact, he was actually getting more gold out of the waste water than they were getting out of the mine.
Really?
Yeah, the gold would appear as fibers growing inside of charcoal briquettes. And, you know, this was just totally baffling to us. We had no idea what was going on. This was just so strange. I mean, why would it grow inside of charcoal briquettes? And then when he got shocked by getting his hands in this water, pulled his hands away, and he noticed that, he was sick, and then he noticed that fibers of gold came out the backs of his hands.
The backs of his hands?
Yeah, and how did the gold get into his hands? When he went to the doctor, because he was feeling really bad, and they drove him back to Baker. This was outside of Baker City, and they drove him back to town. Somebody else had to drive because he was feeling too sick, and the guy drove him back that evening and at night, and on his way back, the guy noticed he was glowing in the dark. You know, I mean, this was just beyond strange. I mean, every strange thing I ever read about in science fiction as a kid, this had it topped. You know?
And you being an inventor type and working with your hands and inquisitive, this must have been pretty fascinating to you. And this puts you on the trail of trying to figure out what this stuff is?
Oh, yeah. You know, I mean, this is like, this stuff probably isn't what made him sick, but it probably was involved. We had to figure out, how did this stuff get into his hands? The only thing that we could think of is that it teleported in there. That it literally, same way it got inside the charcoal briquettes, same way it got into the paint on his car, which was accidentally sprayed by this stuff.
Teleported would mean getting into another, passing through one realm and going back into physical reality?
Something like that, yeah. So scientists call Josephson tunneling, where an electron will go through an electron barrier by going into some other realm or some other dimension and then coming back on the other side, Josephson tunneling. And, you know, they build electronic equipment based on this Josephson effect. Brian Josephson discovered it. Well, we were finding that, I mean, that seemed to be the only logical explanation. So what was this weird stuff that would tunnel into his hands and come out as gold metal fibers? He pulled some of the fibers out that were, I didn't see any that were an inch long, but he pulled some out that were an inch long. All I saw was about a quarter inch or something. But still, that's pretty amazing.
That's really science fiction kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened to he and his health with his lead and arsenic poisoning?
Well, it kind of deteriorated, but, he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you have 4 times the lethal levels of lead and arsenic in your system. Get your affairs in order. You've got 2 weeks to live. That doctors like to give you things, and that's one of the things they like to give you.
Yeah, I hate it when that happens.
Yeah. And but in 2 weeks he was still alive. He was sleeping all the time. He was having all kinds of unusual experiences, like when he'd stand at the toilet to pee, bolts of lightning would jump between his toes and the bolts on the bottom of the toilet.
Really?
I mean, sparks were coming off of him every time he was in any way in contact with ground or water, And it was like he was a generator as much as the water in his processor was generating electricity. And this was just, a lot of electricity. That's a bolt of lightning 6 or 8 inches long, or more. And it takes a lot of volts to get that much of a lightning bolt, and things just kept getting weirder and weirder for him. He just kept getting sicker and sicker, and finally, about a year and a half later, he just kind of dropped out of sight. He moved out of Eastern Oregon into Central Oregon and lived with his parents, and he moved to Portland and lived with his partner, who was a lawyer, and he just, finally, I was trying to work with him in promoting his ozone generators, and I couldn't reach him, and finally I just persisted a lot, and finally talked to him and heard the rest of the story, and he wasn't particularly coherent. He didn't want to put very many words together, just very short sentences. But he said, I have lead and arsenic poisoning. So I went to my mom's health food store and found this book about hydrogen peroxide and how it can be helpful to chelate or get rid of toxic metals. And so I took the book and some hydrogen peroxide to him and told him he ought to read it, and he did, and he took some of the peroxide, and within 2 weeks, well, right before that, he'd been to the doctor, and this doctor, this was after 18 months of feeling this way. This doctor said, you have 2 times the lethal levels of lead and arsenic in your system. Get your affairs in order. You've got 2 weeks to live. I think they teach me to say that in medical school.
Yeah.
And at any rate, he knew that by this time that 2 weeks to live, that doesn't mean anything. Whatever's going on for me, something's keeping me alive.
Yeah.
And so I gave him the book and the hydrogen peroxide. It was 35% food grade hydrogen peroxide. And he took it, and within about 2 weeks he was feeling normal, and within a month he went back to another doctor, and the doctor said, oh, you don't have lead and arsenic poisoning. I don't know what they were thinking. He couldn't possibly have had lead and arsenic poisoning. People don't get over it in 2 weeks. That's nonsense.
Really?
And so,
what kind of dose do you remember? What he took?
The peroxide?
Yeah.
Oh, started out at four drops per day, went up to 20, I think.
Of the pure 35?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard of people doing that.
He would put the peroxide in a glass of water.
Yeah,
He wouldn't. It'd burn your skin if you touch it.
I had no idea that peroxide could chelate metals out.
Well, I didn't either until I read that book, and boy, it was just
pretty amazing.
But something else was keeping him alive.
Huh.
And that was the question. Something was keeping him alive when the lead and arsenic were killing him. And he actually, like I said, the second time he went to the doctor, he only had 2 times the lethal levels. The first time it was 4 times the lethal levels. So he dropped half the lead and arsenic out of his system in 18 months, which is, maybe in 18 years, according to conventional chelation and all that, but, nobody lived 18 years with 2 weeks to live.
And he wasn't doing anything at the time to get it out?
No, he wasn't, not particularly. He did do a little bit of chelation therapy, but it didn't seem to help. It didn't seem to speed things up in any way. But, boy, the peroxide sure took care of it. And so this left us with a big mystery. What is this stuff? What is this stuff that disappears in a flash of light if you put it out and dry it out in the sun? What is this stuff that floats away from your hand so you can't touch it? It levitates. What is this stuff that teleports from the inside of a container to the outside of a container, from the outside of the body to the inside of the body, from the outside of a charcoal briquette to the inside? I mean, I'm a science fiction buff for a long time. I've been reading science fiction since I was a kid, and you hear about all of these things, and you kind of interested in seeing them someday. But hey, I walked right into the thick of it. Every single thing that I've ever imagined as a science fiction reader, I mean, virtually everything I've seen with this stuff. I've seen it teleport. I've seen it levitate away from your hand.
And this is what is called Ormus.
We think it is. Yes.
Ormus. And it is a property, some kind of property of gold?
Well, the gold and other precious metals, platinum, rhodium, iridium, even metals like copper and zinc and nickel have an Ormus form. And this is another form that is not metallic. We think it's a monatom, a single atom, or a diatom, but it doesn't have any valence electrons to grab onto other atoms or other elements. It's all by itself. It's very happy all by itself, sort of like an inert gas. It doesn't react with anything. But it does doesn't chemically react, but it does interact. And these interactions seem to be the very nature of how the body and consciousness and our connection to energy and spirit works.
Oh, well, that's cool.
And the reason we think that is one thing that Jim noticed was that once he started getting well, he was still reluctant to do anything more with it. But so I tell people about it, and nothing happened for about 5 years, and then in 1995, one of the persons that I told about it, actually I had Jim tell a story about it. He contacted me and sent me a tape and audio cassette, and said, "You got to listen to this." And eventually I listened to it, and it was a guy named David Hudson talking about this substance that he discovered, that if you dry it out in the sunshine, it'll disappear in a flash of light. And if you heat it and cool it and heat it and cool it and heat it and cool it in an inert gas and put your hand anywhere near it, it'll float away from your hand. Well, this sounded exactly like the stuff that Jim had figured out, had experienced with this stuff. And so, boy, this is incredible. So Jim was not doing well financially at the time, and I had a little more money, so he and I I paid his ticket, and we went to see David Hudson in Portland, and listened to David Hudson's lecture, and then went to his workshop the next day. And everything there, was just totally made sense. And because it made sense, Jim was no longer afraid to work with this stuff, so he started experimenting around with it. Well, one of the things he discovered was that, like with that charcoal briquette, it would get inside of things that it shouldn't be getting inside of, like his hands, like the charcoal briquette, like the paint on his car. And if it got inside and wasn't too energetic, it wouldn't turn to metal.
It wouldn't turn to metal. It would stay.
It would stay in the Ormus state.
In the Ormus state, which is just something different from metal that interacts with it, but it doesn't combine with it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And in this state, it hangs out. It seems to hang out inside of water molecules. That's the theory, anyway. And inside these water molecules, because these are single unit elements, atoms or diatoms or something, because they're a single unit element, they don't have the same properties that the metallic form has. And there's another thing that we noticed as we were working with it, Jim and I were working with it. And Jim described it best when he said it's like it's got 3 legs. All 3 are here in this world when it's a metal. When it's converted to Ormus, or when it's in the Ormus state before converting to metal, in the Ormus state, it's got 2 legs here and 1 leg somewhere else. And we think that connection between here and somewhere else, let's call it spirit, that connection is what allows it to communicate. So when people eat this stuff, and a lot of people do, when people eat this stuff, they're hooked up to an electroencephalogram, an EEG, brainwave monitor. when they eat it, the hemispheres of their brain become coherent.
Wow.
And they drop into an alpha state, which is a state of meditation, and in about 3 minutes, and in about 15, 20 minutes, they drop into a theta or delta state, a very, very deep meditation, the kind of meditation that somebody would get into after meditating in the Himalayas for 30 or 40 years.
Wow. That's pretty interesting.
Very, very deep meditative state. And in that meditative state, it's not just the left brain and the right brain, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, but the front brain and the rear brain, the more primitive brain, all is in a coherent state. And we think that heart coherence may also be involved as well. So basically the whole body is in a coherent state.
Like whole.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, all kinds of good stuff happens.
Yeah, I guess so. Like it's supposed to happen.
Right.
Like it's supposed to. Now, your website is subtleenergies.com.
Yes.
And there's lots of stuff for folks to read, and you've done quite a bit of research.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this has then been your life since then, just figuring out what this stuff is?
Oh, yeah.
And what does it do and all of that?
Yeah.
Wow. And
collecting information. Mostly the information is generated by other people, but not all of it.
I've heard a couple of things. One was I think I read it maybe on your site, that this fellow, Barry Jim, who we were talking about, he would talk about talking to scientists in his dreams or in another reality?
While he was going through this experience, he was having conversations about science with the biblical Abraham.
The biblical Abraham.
That's what he said. He remembered having conversations with the biblical Abraham about this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that apparently, he says that informed a lot of his work with it.
Uh-huh. And, that's not all that unusual. I mean, we've heard over time that people have reported this kind of activity, right? I think even Einstein would talk about it. He said he'd get a lot of information in his dreams, and
a
lot of. Well, is this any tied in at all, Barry Carter, with this idea of the philosopher's stone?
Well,
this substance, and what does that mean anyway? I've heard that over the years.
There's a lot of substances, alchemy, the technique, or the, can't call it a science, but the process of alchemy has talked about a lot of different things: the universal solvent, the philosopher's stone, the red lion.
Oh, I see.
The green lion. A lot of different substances that are all generally associated with dew or something you can collect from your urine, or something that, but almost always that they are involved with precious metals like gold. Mm-hmm. And they claim that one way to tell if you've got the philosopher's stone is to put some of it on lead or something like that, and we'll convert it to gold. It will literally transmute it. Now, that's not my particular interest. You're
not trying to figure out how to make gold.
No, I'm more interested in transmuting people into whole people. People that are more coherent, more whole, and also what it can do for plants and animals. When this coherence happens, and I think it happens because the Ormus is a communicator. It has one foot in some other dimension, and that other dimension allows it to communicate with all of the other Ormus that's in the same vibration state. And so you get it all, we think it's a spin state. We get it all spinning coherently, and it changes the shape of the water molecule, and that's how it communicates in the body. Water molecule structure changes, and then that water can do different things in the body. And when that happens, because the communication is instantaneous through another dimension, it's kind of like telepathy, like omnipresence, omniscience. It's like being everywhere at once, or knowing everything at once. It's like being connected. And people who are in the state of this left brain, right brain coherence, which is almost always triggered by Ormus, that seems to put them in a place where it's easier to be aware of things that they wouldn't ordinarily be aware of.
Let me invite the folks in. Here's a phone number if you care to ask a question of Barry Carter, subtleenergies.com, subtleenergies.com. And here our phone number is 888-663-6386, 888-663-6386. Email, if you're shy, patrick@oneradionetwork.com. Wow, what a wild story. And so this has been going on for you then for, pretty hard and, pretty steady for like 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
10 years or so.
At least, yeah.
Well, what has been
I
most...
always say I've got tenure.
Yeah, tenure. What's been most surprising, as we learn more about this, what's been the most surprising thing that you've learned about this substance called Ormus over those 10 years? Have you really been surprised a lot?
One thing that really surprised me was when a lady in North Carolina was at her house, and she had this little black cat. His name was Tut, King Tut, she called him. And, he was, I think, 6 months old at the time. When I was there, and he had a tail that had kind of a red tip on the end of it, like it had been injured. It was half a tail actually for a cat his size, and she said, "Oh yeah, he several months ago there was a windstorm and his tail got cut off. Something fell on it or something, and his tail got cut off. So there's only about an inch of tail left." And she showed me the scab that came off the inch of the tail, and I took a picture of it and put it on my website. And she showed me the remainder of the tail that had been cut off. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I could see the cat. So I videotaped, her. And she said, what happened was right after that, she was putting some hand cream on. It's from Priestess Alchemy, one of the Ormus manufacturers. She's putting some hand cream on, and this cat started licking her hand. And this stuff tastes like hand cream. Awful. And this cat was just lapping it up. And she sat there and showed me, and I videotaped it. She sat there and showed me this cat must have licked up a tablespoon of this hand cream.
Yeah.
And
you know how picky cats are.
Yeah. Like getting a cat to do something you don't want to is sort of like herding cats, as they say.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so finally the cat quit. It's a long, boring video because it just shows a cat eating its hand cream. But, a long video. And
this hand cream was made from Ormus, or had a lot of Ormus in it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's from Arizona, Priestess Alchemy.
Priestess Alchemy?
Yeah. And she was also feeding him some other Ormus products from from a little bit of liquid chi, from
oh, well, yeah, I've heard of that. Is that Mountain Mana?
No, liquid chi. Mountain Mana is a good product too, but liquid chi comes from the coast of Washington State.
Liquid chi.
Yeah, and in Texas, there's a really neat producer there, Keith Perry. He's making the Awesome Water, AUSOME. AUSOME.
AUSOME.
Awesome Water, and oh man, it's just made with a magnetic trap. Another thing that Jim figured out was that this stuff, because it's a single unit. We think it's a single unit superconductor.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't actually conduct electricity, but a superconductor has another thing called the Meissner effect, which is it repels magnetic fields. And because it seems to be that, you can run water through a magnetic field, and a certain portion of the water will levitate away from the magnetic field.
Yeah.
And you collect that portion of water, and then you can use that on the skin or drink it or whatever. Well, Keith has made a very special magnetic trap like that to trap Ormus out of his water. He's in Plano, I think, Plano, Texas. I'm not sure.
Uh-huh.
And by doing this, he's concentrated more and more by running through several traps. This water, it has amazing effects.
And folks actually make these traps. I've read, and
mm-hmm.
they make their own Ormus.
Oh yeah, there's plans right on the internet for building these traps.
Do you have them on your site?
On my website, yeah.
On your website, you could just build your own.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And do you have to start with any kind of special water?
It's best underground water seems to be best.
Mm-hmm.
It seems that the Earth's magnetic field drives it out of water that's running across the Earth.
Hmm.
But that means that it goes into the air. And Jim actually has trapped this stuff out of the air and converted it to metal. So we know it's in the air. Huh. The main metals he gets out of the air are copper and silver.
So maybe rainwater wouldn't have much because there's no really total dissolved solids in there. It's pretty distilled. I don't know.
Well, yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
Rainwater can have quite a bit, particularly rainwater from near the ocean,
mm-hmm.
and morning dew. Now, this is the tie-in with the alchemists. The alchemists always talked about how they would collect the morning dew and make that into something that would, have these miraculous properties. One gentleman, one Ormus researcher in Australia, actually made something that from dew and nothing else, just dew, that he fermented over a period of several months in a couple of different methods of fermentation. He made a white powder that would float away from your hands.
It would float away.
You couldn't catch it. And like Jim, he called his stuff fly ash because it'd fly away from your hand.
And there's been health people around the world really over for many years, Barry, talk about how good it is for you to walk around your bare feet in the morning dew. And that would make sense because we absorb stuff from the bottom of our feet.
There you go.
Yeah.
So at any rate, this cat, Tut, by the time I saw him, his tail had grown about 5 inches.
Yeah, really?
After being almost completely cut off.
Boy, that's a trip.
And I've got pictures of him with his tail at about 6 inches long, and then another picture toward the end. Finally, I got Dana to send me some pictures of him with his tail fully regrown.
Well, fully regrown?
Completely regrown.
And was she giving him Ormus regularly?
She was for the first 6 or 8 months or a year.
The hand cream, or did she get some other stuff?
She gave him the hand cream regularly, but she gave him a product that she promotes herself called Ace.
Ace,
and a product that and the liquid chi and hand cream.
That's really wow.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Ormus out there, like on the internet, to buy it. Do you make any?
I make it for myself.
You make it for yourself.
I don't sell it.
You don't sell. How would one know if they're getting any? If it was any good?
Well, I've got a website, a web page on my website of sources that generally are respected by people
good.
And people. Everybody's different, and what works for one person really well may not work for another person as well.
And Barry Carter, are they making it in different ways, or is there one standard way?
There's a lot of different ways to make it, and many of those ways are described on my website.
So this Ormus is possibly like the stuff of God, kind of mojo or chi in a form that we can put our hands on, so to speak. It could be. Well,
we think so. It's sort of a connector between spirit and matter. That's my thought, and that may be why Tut's tail regrew. And a tail has got bones. It's got 18 joints in it, or more or less, and it's got cartilage, things that they say you can't regrow. It's got nerves. They say you can't regrow nerves. I mean, a tail is an extension of the cat's spinal column.
Yes.
And it's fully articulated. It's the equivalent of growing a new arm or leg,
Have you heard of folks with some real spine problems, or any anecdotal evidence of people over the years who've had some really interesting results from taking this?
There's a lot of results that people have written in about, and I've got a lot of them on
your site,
on my website. But to me, the most interesting part of this is that it sort of helps our connection. It helps us to reconnect with ourselves, and it helps us to if something like this happened to a person, they say it's the placebo effect, like with the cat. But it's a little harder to make the argument that it's the placebo effect with the cat.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. How do you convince a cat that its tail's going to grow back?
So,
give it some hand cream.
Yeah. Now I've heard our friend David Wolf. You know David Wolf? Yeah. He's real interested in this substance, as you know, and I think he even makes some. I've never tried his, but he talks about like things like aloe and some even medicinal mushrooms that have Ormus qualities. Do a lot of different things have some form of Ormus in them, do we think?
Well, I suspect that it's essential for all life. You can think of these as essential minerals that we didn't know about before. Because they are single unit atoms. They don't show up very well with spectroscopy. They don't show up when people try to assay them. But we figured out ways of assaying for them. But most of the people that are checking them out are using dowsing and things like that to identify them and figure out where they are. However, we do have some assays on seawater precipitate and on some of the rock source material, like the Priestess Alchemy product, and those assays have involved in some cases conversion to metal and then assaying the metal. And when we've done that, we found that they're really quite rich sources of these elements.
Oh, so there is a way when one comes up with what they call Ormus, you can test it to see just how much go power it has, so to speak.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And And when we get those very, very rich sources, seawater, something like 30%, seawater precipitate, something like 30% of the dry matter weight is Ormus, according to the assays that have been done. And when you get those high levels, and you really want to demonstrate the placebo effect, you put it on plants. Because right now in my garden, I just took some pictures. I've got lettuce that's 4.5 feet tall.
4.5 feet?
Yeah. And I've got dill that's 4.5 feet tall right now.
And
that's a big dill.
And how do you get it into the plants? Do you mix up a powder with water and water it?
You don't. You don't dry it. You keep it moist. You keep it wet. You precipitate the seawater, and you can make precipitate from sea salt. You can make precipitate from Dead Sea salt, or seawater from the Great Salt Lake, or seawater from the ocean. Doesn't matter. And you just raise the pH with sodium hydroxide to 10.78, and you'll get a white precipitate, and that's the good stuff. You rinse the water out, you rinse the salt water out, and you're left with a white precipitate. And you can keep it wet, put it on your plants, put it on your garden, and you'll get phenomenal results. I've got some, you should see my giant nuts.
Really?
Yeah, I've got walnuts that are the size of tennis balls.
And how long have you been putting it on your walnut tree?
Well, these were somebody else's walnut tree. He put it on for 4 years, and the walnuts on the tree that he put it on were 4.5 times the size and weight as the walnuts from the trees he didn't put it on.
That's wild. Now, so you say that you can take ocean water, and you can take what substance and just simply make your own and put it in your plants?
Just sodium hydroxide.
Sodium lye.
Yeah, you used to be able to get red devil lye. Can't get it anymore. But you can get Robic lye, I think, from Lowe's or Home Depot or somebody.
And that works?
Yeah.
And then how do you make it? Say if we had
you raise the pH to 10.78 and no higher.
10.78.
You just by dripping lye water in, mix lye with some distilled water, and then drip the lye water in. And
could we use rainwater? Be good. Oh no, we're going to start. This is the basic water is ocean water, right?
Yeah, you're dripping it into the ocean water, or some other salt water, and you want to probably if you're going to go to the beach and collect it, you'll want to sterilize it a bit.
Yeah.
Boil it first.
Right.
But when you're done, it's put this stuff on your plants, and they just really.
Oh, you mean so you just raise it to 10.78 and you're done?
Well, you have to get rid of the salt water.
And how do you
still salt, and so the precipitate will all be cloudy and fluffy, and then it'll all drop to the bottom. You pour the clear water off the top. Introduce some more fresh water, distilled water, whatever. Shake it up good, let it settle out, and pour the clear water off the top again. Do it 3 or 4 times if you're going to eat it, and at least once if you're going to put it on your garden.
That's why, I've been playing around, Barry, with just ocean water in agriculture for a long time now. With my relationship with Don Jansen, and he studied Maynard Murray's work and did a hydroponic ocean water technology stuff in Florida. And we just mix the ocean water. I don't know what the calculation is, but we just get to about 1,500 parts per million, and the plants really like it a lot.
Oh, they do.
They just really like it.
Well, we figured out what part of it is that they really like. They don't like the salt as much as the
Ormus.
The Ormus, apparently, that's in there. There's Maynard Murray would talk about sea solids, putting sea solids on.
Yeah.
Putting like 2,200 pounds per acre of sea solids. And so you'd mix it with water and spray it on, 2,200 pounds per acre. Well, when we do this, we put like 25 pounds per acre, 3 gallons of water, 3 gallons of this wet precipitate. And we're getting results as good or better than they get with the sea solids.
3 gallons on 25 acres?
3 gallons per acre.
Oh, per acre. 3 gallons per acre. So you spray it then?
You can.
That's really fascinating. So, and folks could actually build these traps and make it themselves. Is that how you make it for yourself?
Well,
you have an Ormus trap?
That's another way of doing it. Yes, you can do it. But trap water is really quite wasteful. If you live in a dry area like Eastern Oregon or Texas,
you don't want to do that.
I probably wouldn't do trap water on plants. But seawater,
ocean water,
out of ocean water, you'll get out of a 50-gallon drum of ocean water, you'll get 10 gallons of precipitate.
And that goes a long way.
Yeah, 10 gallons is worth 3 acres or more.
So by 10 gallons, you mean 10 gallons after you've mixed it up with some fresh water?
Some lye.
Oh, no. I see. Oh, you could actually literally get, after you wash it and wash it and wash it.
You'll get 10 gallons of precipitate, yeah.
Wow. We've talked to a gentleman several times, Professor Ron Couson. We have a...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, do you know him?
Yeah.
He's an interesting guy, and we have an interview with him on the website, Barry. And,
excellent.
And he's got these great magnets that he rigged up my Vitamix, and you vortex the water, and he says that makes Ormus in the water. You can I put a little ocean water in there, and it's yummy to drink.
Well, we're finding that there are several ways, at least we believe, that there are several ways that you can change Ormus and make it more effective in certain circumstances for certain things. One way is different elements seem to do different things, like, Ormus copper may help hair color come back. Other elements seem to be particularly useful for tissue regeneration and things like that. So the different elements is one way that Ormus can differ from itself.
Do you suppose then, if we really get our act together spiritually, then the body will just make more and more of this Ormus on its own, and that's, say, longevity or people who live hundreds of years and all of that?
Well, it's hard to say. I don't know anybody that's done that without breathing and eating and drinking. Maybe some people have done it without eating, but I don't know anybody that's done it without breathing. So if you're breathing,
you're getting Ormus.
You're getting Ormus. So it's hard to. It would be hard to say, well, hey, you can do it without. But yes, then there's a second way that Ormus can differ from itself. Energy. If you put more energy into it, it behaves differently.
What do you mean? Give us an idea.
Well, Jim's ozone generator really energized his Ormus, the Ormus that was in the wastewater from the mine. And this stuff would literally shock you if you touched it. Well, there's a Ormus researcher in Colorado, Danae Harding, and she and her son and daughters are selling a product called Spark of Life water. And this water literally will shock you if you drink it out of the bottle. In fact, you can have a bottle of it. I've got a video of 39 people in a circle, and you take this bottle of water, and one person holds the bottle, which is a plastic bottle, an insulated plastic bottle, and the other person puts and the whole circle, and the other person on the other end of the line of the circle puts their finger in the water, and everybody in the whole circle feels a shock.
Wow.
And you can do it, and they do. I've got a video of them doing it 3 times in a row, and everybody felt it.
That's fun.
And this is just a bottle of water. And Jim, we think, was charged up in the same way. And this charged Ormus, the energized Ormus, like Ron Couson does with his Volixer, his magnetic blender, we think that is another way of energizing.
Oh, the magnets or the board, the spinning with the magnets.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Putting an Ormus substance in a magnetic blender, spinning it, energizing it. That's what we're doing with the magnetic traps.
Same kind of idea.
We're spinning it in a magnetic field, and we get it so energized that it levitates.
It levitates.
And we collect the stuff that levitates out.
So then, could you take somebody's Ormus powder, mix it with water, and then ozonate it, and that would energize it, or you could spin it and play with it all you want? Huh?
Possibly. Now, there was an unusual thing about Jim's ozone generator is that it would do the ozone from it would do things that ordinary ozone wouldn't do, and we don't have any of his ozone generators right now to work with. We're trying to get some made, but so far it hasn't happened. And
so there's ozone. There's ozone generators.
Was special.
So there's ozone generators and there's ozone generators, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just like everything else. Boy, that's really well. So is that why then when Professor Cousin suggested if I put a little bit of pure ocean water in the Vitamixer and spin it, then is the Ormus coming because I'm adding a tablespoon or two of the ocean water, or would you get it anyway?
I think it's because you're energizing the ocean water.
Uh-huh.
The Ormus is the same amount of Ormus. You've just made it more energetic.
Mm-hmm. Now, have you been ingesting it over a long period?
For about 10 years.
Very regularly?
Yeah.
And what kind of effects, health or consciousness-wise, have you experienced over those 10 years?
Well, I can't seem to get sunburned anymore. I don't know why. And when my suntan never leaves, even though I never get out in the sun anymore, I'm sitting in front of this computer all the time almost. Except, I've been doing a little gardening this summer. And I seem to be getting a whole lot better at being in the right place at the right time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A whole lot better at that.
How about sleep and dreams and such?
I don't remember dreams very much, and I seem to do just as well with 6 hours of sleep as I used to do with 8.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really feel like I need much more than 6 hours of sleep.
Mm-hmm. Have you experienced any health challenges during those 10 years, or anything of significance at all?
No,
Mm-hmm.
No, I can't think of anything.
Mm-hmm. Anything happened?
I got sick last year. I had a cold.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, I think.
Any difference with your hair or nails or anything like that?
Oh, my hair color doesn't seem to be going. I'm 59. I don't seem to be getting gray as fast as my younger brother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had mentioned the gray and the copper, and for the hair, copper's always been connected, hasn't it, Barry, with that kind of idea?
Oh, yeah, it has.
Over the years. There's actually people where you could buy Ormus copper?
Oh, yeah, uh-huh. I believe that, I know Ancient Transformational Technologies, Danae Harding's,
mm-hmm.
She does sell an Ormus copper, I believe, and Don Nance at Ocean Alchemy, I think he sells Ormus copper, as does Seek Verda at, I'm blocking
Seek,
his name.
how do you spelling that?
Seekverta.
And
he's out of Hong Kong, and his product is called Tibetan Gold,
yeah. And our listeners would be fairly confident with these kind of people you've been mentioning that they're going to get some a good product for whatever it costs.
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. These people are all very good product.
Is there a lot of rascals out there selling stuff that they call Ormus and isn't?
There may be, but you're not going to find any of those linked on my website.
Not on your website, though. Huh? So you have the whole story on your site. And so what are you working on now? I mean, how do you spend your time?
Well, mostly educating people and doing interviews and doing lectures and I have about 100 different Ormus forums where people can get online and discuss, post email stories about what's happened to them and so on. So that helps to collect more information about what it does and how it works for people. And so a lot of people, if you email me, my email is Sumro, SUMRO.
SUMRO?
Which is Ormus spelled backwards.
Okay.
Sumro at zz.com, zz.com.
Mm-hmm.
And email me, and I can send you a link
to some forums if people want
to forums. There's one for Dallas and one for Houston and one for Austin, and I've got forums basically set up for various centers. I usually draw a 100-mile radius circle around a city and say
that's wild.
Anybody in that circle is, and then there's global forums as well.
Yeah, I think have I seen Ormus forums on CureZone.com? Maybe? I don't know.
Quite possible.
I'm on there from time to time with some of the people I interview, and this is just wild stuff. So there's no telling where this is all going with people like you poking around in this Ormus world. The David Wolfs of the world and you guys, and what you guys are going to come up with, right? I mean, who knows?
Well, we're talking about something that grew a new tail on a cat.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about something that makes walnuts grow 4.5 times as large in 4 years. And
that's pretty
we've
big.
Got pictures of oranges that have grown 4.5 times as large in 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody that's used it on plants has had some amazing report. It seems to only be 30 to 40 to 50, maybe 90% better after the first year, but it seems to increase each year too. So it's pretty amazing for plants and for animals and for people, and it seems to be related to consciousness and free energy and anti-gravity and
no telling.
All that stuff. So
goodness knows we could all use to get a little more whole these days.
Well, yeah, and with the price of oil and gasoline, food prices are definitely going to rise, and it's going to be more and more difficult to get food from far-off places. So the more that you can raise in your own backyard. When Cuba lost the support of the Soviet Union, Cubans almost starved.
Really?
But the citizens, it wasn't the government, the citizens just got together and said, hey, we're going to grow our own food. And right now, in Havana, half of the produce eaten in Havana is grown in Havana.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and that's something that's totally possible in Texas.
Oh, yeah, a lot of different places around the world. It's we need it, too, because who knows what we're all in store for. It looks like it's interesting times ahead, hey, Barry Carter?
Well, indeed. Indeed.
Boy.
But the Ormus is the best thing I can think of to cheer us all up about our future, because, growing produce that's 4 times as big is got to be good.
Oh, by the way, do they taste good, too? I mean, the size is one thing, but do they have good taste?
Not only do they taste good, I mean, they taste better than anything, but I get a head rush when I eat it. It feels great.
Well, I can't wait to try it. And you have pictures of the produce on your website?
Oh, yeah.
Barry, it's a joy talking to you. I've been looking forward to it, and I'll keep in touch, and I'll sure explore some of these people, maybe even talk to them as well and see what they're up to. And your website is subtleenergies.com, right? Subtleenergies.com.
Exactly.
Barry, thanks a lot, sir. Appreciate you taking the time.
It's my pleasure.
Bye-bye. Barry Carter, my name is Patrick Timpone. Now, isn't that pretty fun stuff, huh? Man, I love it. Okay, we're going to talk about your freedom and your